Hello everyone, I'm Alex Russo and I'm a science fiction and fantasy author. Today we will be going down memory lane for some of my viewers as we learn how to write a complex protagonist. So, if you are a Zoomer watching this channel, I'm sure you've seen this show Legends of Chima or related products in stores before. For those of you who aren't aware of the show, it is set in a fantasy world named Chima inhabited by humanoid animals with the technology and weapons of Japanese science fiction. Their entire society revolves around a crystalline resource known as chi, which is used to power weapons, vehicles, and even grant an individual superpowers through a piece of clothing known as a harness. The main conflict of the show stems from the use of chi, which is distributed equally among the tribes by the lions, even though they have a sole monopoly on it. However, certain tribes wish to control the chi for themselves, stealing the supremacy away from the lions, which drives the main conflict of the show's first season. Throughout the series' first season, we're introduced to two characters, Laval, a lion, and Cragger, a crocodile. In their first episode, Cragger and Laval are both depicted more or less as rebellious, obnoxious teenagers because they are both young and they love joking around. As the episode progresses, Cragger suggests to Laval that they sneak into the lion's temple where the chi is made and take a look at it. Because it is against the rules, Laval is hesitant to follow through, but ultimately acquiesces. However, once inside, this is where we see them start to diverge, revealing their true natures. There is a certain age that animals have to be before they use the chi, otherwise they will be overwhelmed by the power and have a perpetual drive to use it. As Cragger and Laval approach the pool, Cragger takes an orb of chi and plugs it into his harness despite Laval's warnings. This causes Cragger to go down a path where he becomes an on and off antagonist in the first season. While there are several tropes we can analyze in this one episode alone, and the rest of the series, I'd like to stop here and start to explain some differences and similarities between Laval and Cragger, and how Laval is a very complex protagonist considering Legends of Chima was a children's show. First of all, Laval and Cragger are not that different from each other when you start to think about their similarities. They are princes who are the heir apparents to their respective tribes, are jokers, can be rebellious at times, and play numerous pranks on their other friends or random strangers. They're two sides of the same coin. Yet, what I found interesting is that Laval and Cragger have separate paths for them in the series because of their core characteristics and individual upbringings. Not much is given about Laval's family, though it is apparent he had a fatherly figure in his life through the wise Lion King Lagravis, who mentors him in the ways of the lions and how to be a good leader. It seems Cragger also had mentorship, but the teachings avoided things like ethics. While there is no information about Lagravis in his youth, we do have flashbacks in the second season to when Cragger's father, Crominus, was a young man. What I found interesting is that Crominus was like what Cragger becomes later on in the series. He was manipulative, power-hungry, and unethical. This even persists into his old age during the confrontation in the first episode between Crominus and Lagravis, as Crominus and his wife, Crunket, appear to place full responsibility for Cragger's misbehavior on Laval, and even go as far as falsely accusing Laval of coercing Cragger into plugging the chi orb, since the lions could only get away with it since they were the dominant tribe. This contrast between their respective role models sets them up for who's going to be the protagonist and the antagonist in the series. While one could think Laval is an anti-hero because of his similarities to Cragger and his personality, this is not necessarily the case. While he is capable of causing trouble, I find the contrasts between him and the other three antagonists of the first season interesting. Crueler, Cragger's sister, was actually the firstborn in her family, which would make her the true heir apparent. Yet, because the parents saw Cragger hatch first, she was ignored. This drives her to lust after power. And she even manipulates Cragger by using his emotions to drive him to follow through with certain tasks, and a semi-intelligent flower whose pollen makes him easily suggestible to her evil wishes. Wariz, the chieftain of the wolf tribe, also lusts for power, as he asks Cragger what chi felt like, and he stops at nothing to achieve domination of Chima. Because there is not much revealed about the wolf tribe in the show, or any canonical descriptions of Warris's upbringing and role models, I cannot truly say why he became power-hungry, as he avoided Crueller's manipulations and a divide eventually rose between him and Cragger. Razar, a de facto leader of a flock of ravens, is just plain greedy, and to put it in the words of Cragger, they only needed some trinkets and treasures in order to perform a task. While all three share greed as their common drive, along with lesser motivations, Laval is shown to lack greed, and in fact, in one episode, when he is given extra chi by Cragger during a crocodile attempt to depict the lions as being unfair, he attempts to return it. I feel like this difference is what contrasts Laval as the protagonist from the antagonists of the series even more. For while Laval does have his faults, he is trying to do the right thing, according to his mentorship and plain ethics, whereas the others have no scruples to achieve their goals. Additionally, Cragger, unlike Laval, appears to reject help. At the end of the first episode, he severs a rope that was being used to pull his parents' tank out of a canyon during a battle and attempts to solve this issue by himself. This shows Cragger as prideful, as he rejected the only hope he and his parents had of rescuing them from the canyon. With Crunket and Crominus presumed dead, Cragger is forced to assume full responsibility for the crocodile tribe, leaving him with a sense of ennui that is explored briefly in the second episode. Cragger also does not assume responsibility for his actions, blaming everyone else for them. In contrast, Laval mourns the loss of his friendship with Cragger from the fallout, because he recognizes the role he played in sneaking into the lion's chi temple. Laval also exhibits signs of agency, as he always assumes full responsibility for his actions and recognizes the role he played in the circumstances he was involved in. For example, after Crueller sabotages a peace talk where many of Laval's friends become trapped, Laval steals a powerful form of chi and uses it to rescue them. Because this violated a core part of the lion's laws, he assumed full responsibility for his actions, and allowed himself to be exiled despite his father's attempts to reverse the punishment. At the end of the episode, Laval is forgiven for his actions, but still insists on bearing the burden of his mistake due to his innate humility. While there is more I can discuss, I'm going to conclude on these final points. Laval is depicted as seeking to fulfill his duty and purpose, a role which Cragger lacks because of his manipulations. While both are capable of exacting violence in order to fulfill their needs, Laval is depicted as having a more rational use of violence, whereas Cragger fights like he has a disregard for life, and that everything else is an obstacle in his way. Additionally, Laval acts in a more level-headed manner and recognizes the roles others have played in his life, and their roles in helping him maintain some semblance of normalcy in Chima, whereas Cragger just seeks to have total control and power while he disregards those who aid him, such as the wolf and raven tribes. So, how can we apply what we learned today in writing a protagonist, and writing protagonist-antagonist conflicts and contrasts? First of all, make your protagonist and antagonist similar. What I mean by this is that you need to put them on the same level. They can be the same social class, have the same goals and desires, are from the same town or country, have similar personalities, or anything else that you can think of that gives them some semblance of similarity. Because of this, you can cause your readers to recognize aspects of each character that are similar, but still leave room for differences between the two that influences their actions and paradigms. Second, have the approaches taken or ideas about achieving a certain goal or resolving a conflict be different. This sets a clear dividing line between who's the villain and who's the hero. Third, have the protagonist exhibit virtuous qualities such as humility, mutual respect, and appreciation for others. On the contrast, have your antagonist only pursue a goal because there is something in it for him, or he's being manipulated to fulfill a certain role. Finally, have the protagonist assume full responsibility for his actions, both good and bad. This will create a well-rounded, honest main character. Your antagonist, however, will only take credit for achieving a certain goal if it goes as planned, and will always formulate some excuse for his wrongdoings or blame others for actions he was responsible for when there's faults in the plan or the quest to achieve the goal goes wrong. That is all I have for today. Thank you for watching, and happy writing.